JavaScript events are mechanisms that allow you to code to respond to various actions that happens in a web page or application. These actions ranges from user-click interactions, keyboard input, document structure change, or network-related events. Events enable you to create interactive and dynamic web experience. Hi, welcome to JavaScript 109. In this lesson, we are going to be talking about basic event handlers. In JavaScript, we have 5 major types of events, which are mouse events. This includes events triggered by user interaction with the mouse, such as click, double-click, mouse over, and mouse out. 2. Keyboard events. These events are generated when user interacts with their keyboard, such as key press or key release. 3. Form events. These events are related to HTML form elements such as submit and change events. 4. Focus events. This event occurs when an element gains or loses focus, like when you click on an input field or tap between elements. Lastly, document and window elements. These events are related to the overall document and browser window, such as the loading of the page, resizing the window, or closing the window. Okay, let's get into the coding and let's continue from where we stopped in our previous lesson. I gave an assignment and that was supposed to be to build a to-do app. Okay, that's going to be the focus of our attention today. We're going to use it to introduce event handlers and also keyboard events and form events. So let's go ahead and build our interface. We have our input followed by our button. So we are building the structure of what we want before we start programming what we want into the system. We want to provide where the section it will be, where our task will be loading into. Since it's a form of a list, we can do UL, which stands for unordered list. We can make it ordered list, which means it will be counting one after the other. Then just to show you how our template will look like, this is how our item will look like once we start adding it. Another rule of the thumb that you can use is you can first design the way your template will look like, then before really creating the app. Remember that we've started using JavaScript, and in HTML normally what we do is to design a static content. So you can first design a static content before you go ahead and then start programming what you need to do. Normally this is how our static content will look like. So now what we would then need to do is to program the system in such a way that we can then be able to use all these components to be able to achieve what we want to do. So therefore, let's start going into the details of what we need to do. First of all, what we are looking at here is to be able to trigger an event in such a way that when we click on this button, whatever that is in this section will preload inside this part. So let's go ahead and see how we can do that. I'm going to remove this content. I'm going to give it an ID, and the reason we're giving an ID is so that we can easily add elements into this section dynamically using JavaScript. We're also going to give this guy a name, or rather an ID. We're going to give this text section an ID. Again, the reason is because we want to be able to grab the value of what is inside here and be able to add it as a list element inside the ordered list that we're about to create. So I'm giving this one ID. The last one we have is the button to tie the whole thing together. So what I'm doing here now is I'm giving the button a function on click function. I'm going to create a function, and that function is going to be called AddTodoList. Obviously this function has not been created, so we're creating it on the fly, so that by the time we're ready we will now go and write the code to do this function. This is pretty much what we need to do in our HTML for now. Then we can then use the JavaScript to manipulate the interface to get what we want. Let's go ahead and tie the JavaScript inside. So what we need to do is to be able to write this function so that when we click, whatever that is inside here will be added into this section. So there are a couple of things I want to introduce now, and that is our global variable. So we can have our text, since we will be using it in our function, we can declare it globally. so that it's generally accessible to other things that we will need. And we can do document.getElements by ID, and the ID is called txt. We can actually console log and see what is happening. So we console log txt, and this is the first time I'm working with text input box in JavaScript. So if you put this and you say hello, we could do console log txt and specify that we want the attribute value, because you know that the value is how we set the content of an input element. So we can say value, and if we try to do that again, let's say hello, and we do add, notice that we have our hello here. So meaning you can actually use txt.value to get the value of the input box. So that's fine. We already know this, and what we need to do is to get the value, but we need to create a list item inside the unordered list that we have here. So we can create a kind of a style to visualize our ordered list that we have there. So that will give us a kind of a visual display of what's going on. Let's create the variable that will hold or the ordered list. Let's create the variable so that we can be able to append child to it. And the variable name is OL. Remember what we are doing. We are trying to create an object, all the objects, so that we can reuse it in our code. This is what we've been able to do now. We now have this one. We have this text box element. We now have the OL. We don't need the ID of the button because we are calling the function directly. So we've been able to do these three things now. The thing we are creating dynamically now is the LI. We want to create the LI dynamically so that the hello we just show here once we put it inside this button. This is what we want to create dynamically. We want to say let LI is equal to documents.createElement, because we are creating a new element and the name of the element is LI. So once we've been able to do that, we then need to be able to set the text of the element, that's the content of the element. And to set the content of the element, we use inner HTML to set that, and we are setting it to the value of the text that was captured by the user. Once we've done that, the next thing is to append the lists, that's the LI, into our OL. That's to append it inside this section here. And to do that, we have a function that we can call, which is called append child. We did this in our previous video. Let's get to see a demo and see if it works. So good is working well. This is working well, and this is the to-do assignment. However, we are not done yet. There's quite a lot of things we want to introduce today, as we earlier said, and that is events, because the event we were able to do today or previous class was just the click event. There are more events that you can imagine that the browser can allow you to do. Apart from that, there are quite a lot of things that this to-do app is supposed to do, and when you are using the system, you should be able to kick issues with your interface, and this is where UI UX come, user experience comes, because as you can see, immediately we add the item, this section is not going away. Ideally, once you add an item, it should clear off and allow you to do something else, because as we keep adding, it's just still saying world there. So in a proper system, it will be preferable that once you click add, this section should be cleared. How do you then achieve that? You achieve that by emptying the value of the text here after you must have completed your task. After the item has been added into this list, what should happen next? It should clear the value of the text. And look at the function here. At the point of number 7, that section is done. That is where the list is being added to the ordered list. So at this point, it's safe for us to clear the value of the text. And to do that, you just set it to an empty string by doing like so. Let's give it a try and see if we have that result. So if I type school there and I click add, you can see the difference. It's emptying this side for me, which is what we're expecting, such that it's cleaner and it gives a better experience as regards to what we have before. Then if I do work, I have this. So this is better. Just by adding one line of code, you've made the user experience better from what we have before. What we want to talk about now is event handlers. Before now, we know that there are two methods of adding events to an element, and that is either by using the attribute here on click by using the function name and then attaching function to it, or by using an ID and using JavaScript to attach the attribute of the method. So let's go ahead and do that, and then I will show you the difference of what we have. So instead of using on click event here, we can just do ID and call this function say button add. That's the ID here, and we can create that button here. We can get the elements so that we can use it. This is what we're using before. So we used something like this in our previous example in such a way that doing it this way, whenever we click on the add, it will still work. So you can see that this method also works where you have this like this. But what if you want to assign more than one event to a particular button? Because it's possible that this button should be able to do two things. You don't want to have so many code attached to a particular function. You want to split your function. How will you want to split your functions? For example, you might have a function that says the work of the function is to clear box. That's the work of the function, to just clear the box. And this function is as simple as this. So even though this function can be called within this section to do text and then to clear our box, it's possible that you want to add more than one function to a particular element like this. If you do it this way, what will be run will be the last thing, not the first thing. So if you run it this way, the first one will not be executed. It is the last function that you wrote that will be executed. The last assignment is what will be executed to this one. This does not allow you to be able to add multiple events to a particular. What I want to show you now will allow you to add multiple events on a particular element, and that's more of like one of the standard way of adding events to elements. How do we add event handlers to your elements? Pretty simple. Add events listener, and the purpose of this event listener is that it allows you to have event listeners on any HTML DOM, such as HTML elements. So let's go ahead and see the parameter that it requires. One of the parameters that it requires, the first parameter is the event that you want to happen or you want to capture. So in this case, the event we are looking at is the click event. So you remove the on, so it will be click that you'll be dealing with, and then you call the function that you want to execute. In this case, we'll call this function, which is AddToDo. So once you do it this way, you can then try it and see. You can see that our hello is adding there, and you then decide that okay, this particular button should do more things. It should be able to handle another function, and in this case, we want it to handle the clear box function. So, and we're still attaching it to the click event. So you can see that we are repeating the same line, but this time around we've attached another function, which is to clear the box. So if we run this now and say hello, and we add, it will run the first one and run the second one. This event is attached to this, meaning the click event does two functions at the same time. This could not be achieved with the previous method that we have. Going forward, we'll be using addEventListener to listen to events that we want to capture for advanced things. For the next events that we're trying to look at, we'll be using addEventListener because they have other functions that we want to be looking at. Having said that, one of the important things when you pass an event is that the event comes with its own argument, with its own parameter that allows you to check what is going on in the event itself. Because when you are carrying out an event, there's a lot of things that happen. Where did the user click on? What part of the page was the user clicked on? And there are other events like mouse over events. Which part of the screen did the user take the mouse over? Those are event information. Like if you are using key down events like that, for example, what key did the user press? Those information are captured inside an argument or inside a parameter that you can query and decide what to do with it. Still using this add, we are going to test out one of the parameters now and see. So if I come here, as I've said, you always have event argument. So you can see there's a new argument here which is called events. This event parameter allows you to automatically check what is happening to the event that is being logged or that is being pushed by the user. So here, what I want to do now is to dump the event handler so that you are going to see what is going on in the user event, because we're going to click the add now and you're going to check out all the information that is being captured when we click. So when you click now, you can see the result event of what the system logged. The browser logged that these are the things that the browser logged. You can see the altitude angle, all this information bubble through. We're going to get details into this later on. You can see the layer X and layer Y. This is where your mouse is on the screen. Offset to and page. All this information are what was captured when I clicked. These events are very important. You can see the type is called click. When I clicked, all this information were captured. I use this for advanced features. You will get to see where we're going to use it in this demo. But for now, you should know that when you're using AddEventListener has the ability for it to submit the events to you for you to process. When we're using the normal feature for the function, calling it by function, we couldn't capture the events in details of what the user is submitting to the system. But here, whenever you use this, you can get that functionality. What we want to achieve right now is to be able to type here, and immediately we press enter, the system is going to capture our item inside this section. Meaning we're going to do away with this add button here. We don't need the add button anymore. We want the system to be very intuitive in such a way that when you just press enter, it will just capture your item here automatically. Let's go ahead and remove the button. And note the reason why we're doing this. The reason why we're doing this is such that we can capture the events of what is going on. So what we then need to do right now is we still have this is our button add, which we're not adding anything to button again because our button is gone. Where we need to add our events to is on this text box, and this is our text box here. And what we are doing in the text box is that we are first adding event listener, and the event listener says this: add to-do list. Once we do add to-do lists, it's going to do all of this for us. There's click event on the text box, and you can see as we are clicking, it's actually doing what it's supposed to be doing. But this is not the kind of what we want. We want it that when we press the enter key, that is when it should do that. And the purpose of this event as an argument here is such that we can check and see the information that is being received by the browser. And one of the things we are looking out for is the fact that when the user has pressed an enter button, that way we know that the user is done. And when they press enter button, we want it to capture the information. So we're not really worried about the click events. The click event is not what we're after. We're after an event called key press. There are different kind of events under the text box or things that has to do with keyboard capture or the keystroke. There's a key press, there's a key down, there's a key up, and what have you. So we're going to use the key up. Key up means when your hand is off the key. So there's a key press is when you press it down. Key up when your hand is off the key. So we do key up. So immediately you do key up, it starts receiving the event. We can try it. You see also when I press the key, you can see that it starts accepting our information. When I press the key, the function, which is this, is being called. But of course, we want it to be called, but we're not done with our entry. But it's adding it anyway because it's obeying the law of what we put there. So what we need to do is the fact that we need to check that it is the event which is captured, checks the character. And once it sees the character is equal to something else that is not equal to enter, it should not allow us to enter that value there. So let's go ahead and see how we can check this information. First of all, let's put our console log so that we can log the events, and we will check the system. I already know what it is, but I just want to show you how these things are done so that you can check it yourself. So if I put this here, you can see what is here. It's saying keyboard events. And the keyboard events that we have here, if I click on it, you can see, if you look through it, you will see where we have key code. That's called key A, meaning that A was pressed. Then if you look deep again, if you look more again, you will see key, which is saying A. Then you see key code as well, say 65. Then let me press enter. I'm about to press an enter key now, so that you see what code represents enter key. I just press enter key now, and I go to the second one to check the details. Notice what happens in the code for key. For the code for enter, it says enter. It means you can actually check if the code is enter to determine that you actually press enter. Let's check other ones. You also have key called enter. You also have key code if you want to check against number, but I'll prefer for us to check against string, because that's more easier for us to read. Let's check that and then see. How do you check? It's called events. Whatever events that you have, which is event here dot key. If you go to your key, which is here. So let's go ahead and do our check now, which is all this code should be executed here. The only time the code here should be executed, because this code here is what is responsible for adding whatever we have here. So the only time this code should ever run is when our event.key is equal to enter. So you can go ahead and write your if statement. And you try to write that again. Let's go ahead and try. So if I do SD like that, you can see that nothing is happening until if I press enter, we are expecting that all this is going to be captured here. So when I turn enter, we have this information. So this is the way that you can use event listener to listen to any kind of events, and using the information that the event listener submits to you, you can also make further decision on what you want to do based on the information that the event listener is sending to you. So we've made this our app more streamlined in such a way that it doesn't need that extra button you have there. The next thing we're about to do is to provide like a checklist in the front of this item. And before we go and do that, because it will involve us writing quite a lot of code here, but I will first show you the interface so that you will understand how the interface should look like. And when we are building it, it shouldn't be difficult for you guys to understand. So let's go ahead and build the interface and see. Currently, the interface of what we are building is like so. This is the HTML interface of what we have, and we can prove that if we put hello here and press enter. So you can see that they're identically the same. I'll call this user define. This is user define, and if I do another hello here, this is what the system provides. So you can see that they are identical. Now we want to provide a different interface, we want to provide a different form factor, such that, because we want to change the way the app looks a little bit, such that when we click on the checkbox here, it will strike an arrow through the task, meaning that we are done with the task. So how do we then need to achieve that? First of all, we need to put our input type checkbox, because we want to create that kind of effect. And we want to also say here should carry our list item. So it should repeat our hello here, or our item that will capture as a list. So you can see the list item here is a little bit small. So let me style it in such a way that we can easily see it. So this is just for this demo alone. So it's just for this demo so that we can see it better. Now this is what the template we're about to deal with now. And the reason why I'm showing you this template is such that you understand the view of what you are dealing with when you are working with your JavaScript. That's the reason why I'm showing you this. Now let's look at what our JavaScript has now. If you go ahead and do hello. So what is it missing? It's missing our input checkbox, which is what you need to create dynamically. First, before you do anything. So let's match these templates, and that's why I designed it in this format so that you can see what we need to do. It means you need to create an input box, and once you've created that, you attach that to your LI that you created dynamically. So this should be fairly easy. You use JavaScript to create a new input checkbox, and once you've done that, the LI will append child, and the child is going to append is going to be input box so that it will look this way. Let's go ahead and give it a try. So at this point that we've added the value inside, the value has been added here. Before we add it to the ordered list, we can create input, or we can just call it checkbox. So I'll say cbox is equal to documents. So we'll create inputs, and we have several kind of inputs, by the way. So since I know that we have several kind of inputs, and I know the kind of input I'm being specific of, and I know the kind of input is called checkbox. So I'm gonna say that my input type that I'm focused on is checkbox here. That's what I'm doing here. So let's make our code a little bit readable. And this part is where we're setting information. And at this point is where we're adding our LI and say we are appending child. So what child are we appending to it? Cbox. So let's see if this will work. So this is the default that we have before, just to compare. Then I will put new input. Okay, so you can see what is happening here. It's adding at the front. We need to replace this inner HTML, because when you use inner HTML, inner HTML will remove all the contents inside and replace it with only itself. This section here is inner HTML. It means everything inside it. So we can't use inner HTML with append child together. So it's either we just use append child continuously, meaning this has to be also a child, like a span item. So this needs to be like a span, such that we can add it as an item as well. Let's go ahead and add that. So instead of having as an inner element, so we can create another item here and say this is span, and pose of our span is such that we can have our item there. So I can then do my span to have my value, such that I can then append as many elements as I want inside the child. So I can do this. So here I'm adding the box, and I'm also adding the span. So let's give it a try. So you can see that here I've added the item here, which is at this point the box, and here I've added my span. Now we have the code running this way. So as I've said, we are able to, instead of using the inner HTML on list, we just have it on span that we just created. And this is to allow our list to add as many things as we want. In this case, we add our checkbox, and then we can have our text right there. That's the purpose of the reason why we removed inner HTML on the list. Moving on to the other thing that we want to do. Now we can remove this one, and we can comfortably say we have our hello, and we can do world as well. So we have something like this presented in the way we want it. We can then do a function, which is what we want to do next, in such a way that once you mark a task that has been completed, that you strike it through as the fact that we were completed with the task. Where do you think we are going to add that function on? Obviously, it's on the inputs that we just created. And you notice that we created everything dynamically. So just look at it now. This is the input box here. So it means whatever you want to do, you need to add the event here. Whatever event you add there, you can program it to do anything you want by being able to understand where you are on the document, because the document allows you to manipulate everything that you want to manipulate. So you need to be able to think about it. Okay, right that I'm here, what do I want to do? You want to first, let's even console log that we are checking it's responding to our click to see that it's actually working. Then we can then move on from that section. And this is it here. So if we do here cbox, and remember the event listener, so you can actually add an event listener to it. so that you can do whatever you want to do. And again, we have several forms of event listener, so we're just using this method. So if you do click and the function we're just trying to call, you can also write the function directly there, because we've not written the function. I just want to write the function directly here, and it's a function with no name, which is more like a closure, and then you execute what you want to execute in the code block. So what we're executing here is ability for us to log the events. So the function that you are calling, you can also put an event inside. So I don't want the event to affect this event that I have here. Remember that we're inside another function. So I don't want this event to clash with this event. So we can just call it E. The name that you call it here doesn't really matter, because the name here is you are creating a function. So any parameter that you said it is what it will make use of inside. So because we're in this function here, I want just to create my own name. So let's go ahead and see all the information that will be captured when we click on that button. So when we click on this button, let's see what goes on. So look at what is going on here. Immediately we click on it, because we are dealing with click event, we're able to see click event function. This pointer event. So you can check another event that you can use. That event is called change. So what happened once it changes from the current state that it is to another state is when you can then check what state was it before and what state is it now. Let's go ahead and enter something there and click and see what the event is logging back. So immediately you click on this, you can see that you're reporting an event here. Once you check, you can then see all the future, the type of event that you're sending. You can see that the event type is called change. You can then check itself. Let me check myself and see if I'm clicked or not. You could actually call that to see itself, and that is by using the target attribute. So you can see the target attribute. You can use it to check for the change status or the checked status, and the check status here says it's checked. Immediately I want to check, and you go and look at the event log again, you will notice that the event log will then become checked is false. If I look at the target and I go to checked, you can see that checked is false. And these events are different for different components or elements. Obviously, you don't have anything called checked for text box, so you shouldn't be looking for checked in text box. But for checkbox there is, and that's why I'm looking for it. So all the things you are trying to achieve is available within the properties of the elements. So, and that's why you need to know all the things that are possible within what you are working with. Now that we know the section that we're looking out for, remember the section we're looking out for is under e.target.checked. That's where we are looking out for to make sure it is checked or not. So let's go ahead and check. If you want to check if your e.target.checked is equal to true, because that's what we are, even though we are concerned about the both of them. If it's true, do something. If it's not true, meaning it is false, so let's log what it is we want to do. If it's true, what do we want to do? If it's true, strike true, else remove strike. So how can you strike through a text? A way to strike through a text is just to use a style sheet. We'll just use a style sheet to strike through it. So we're going to style the list item. That's the list item here. We're going to write and add a class to strike through it. So let's just go to our CSS and create a strike through class. So that should be line through. Let's go ahead and go back to our code and see how we can implement a strike through by adding it to our li. And what are we striking through? We are striking through our li, which we have here as an object. We have access to it. We are looking at it right now. We're looking at our li right now. So let's go ahead and style our li. Remember how to add class information. We just said the class name is equal to strike. It's as simple as that. And when we are done with it, else you should just remove it. We don't want it there. We just set it again to blank. Let's give it a try and see what we'll have. Let's add more than one stuff. And let's do this. So you can see that immediately we start that, you can see that line is going through. And when you uncheck it, you see that go off. Let's give it a little bit of future. So let's gray it out and let's try it again. So let's give it a try. So you can see that effect that it has. I think that gray needs to go way whiter. And if we do it again, so if you try that again, you get this feature, you get this effect. Okay, your assignment for this week is almost simple, I will say. I want you to be able to add more feature to this task, to this to-do task, in such a way that when you click, by default, when you add all these tasks here, it should be able to tell you that you have 5 tasks on the bottom here. The system should be able to count the number of tasks that you have. And as you remove a particular task, you should see the number remaining. It should show you that you have 3-4 more tasks remaining here. As you close the number of tasks, you should reduce the number of tasks remaining here. That is your assignment for this week. Thank you for staying to the end. I hope you enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and turn on bell notification in order to be notified when we release new videos. See you in the next one.